I experienced what the vestibular world meant. A lot of times, what vestibular means is confusing to a lot of people. It's a term that doesn't relate to natural everyday activities for most people. But I started to experience what the vestibular world involved when I had a little girl and she was the age of 2. Started to notice she was having terrible headaches, grabbing at her head and pushing into the floor. And of course, as a new mom, I was concerned about what was going on. And the doctor suggested a migraine headache, knowing that to the adult, that makes us feel like we want to pull our hair out. And so that's exactly what she was experiencing, was that sensation of wanting to just push on her head or pull her hair out. And I realized, she was experiencing what was a migraine headache. So fast forward a couple of years, her hormones started to change, and she started to the hormones at the age of 2 are raging, and so they are what develops us into a boy or a girl. And what happens is that will start to die down through our 5, 6, 7 year old. And when she was about 6 years old, I was moved to North Carolina, and there's a lot of hills. And she was going to a school out in what seemed to be like a very far out place for us. And we were driving, and I started to notice that she would complain of her stomach hurting. What became then, oh, my head is hurting. And then it was, Mom, I'm scared. I'm scared. You're driving too fast. You're driving too fast. When actually I was just doing the speed limit. So I started to get worried about what all she was experiencing. And at the same time, I happened to be taking a course on vestibular therapy and what people experience and how they feel. And it came up that there is such a thing as a vestibular migraine. And I started to hear all the details of what the symptoms were, and I realized that that is exactly what my daughter was experiencing, was a vestibular migraine. And so I started to pay attention to what her symptoms were, and it would start with a tummy ache and that discomfort, which then would become the headache. And then it would become a disorientation to what speed we were actually traveling in our vehicle. And I realized the connection of vestibular, which just means that we know where we are in time and space. So then we realized, with her having these vestibular migraines, when it would be at nighttime, she would even have them even worse. And the anxiety would even heighten in the darkness. So if you can only imagine the light of car lights lighting up the guide rails or trees, and you see this post going by you multiple times, you start to get confused to where you are and what's going on, because your body doesn't feel the car moving, especially if you're in a very nice car with minimal issues with shock absorption. So if you're driving very smoothly and all of a sudden you see these lights making everything flicker past you very quickly, you become scared and disoriented. She would get her migraine headache. She would become very anxious. And I realized that she was experiencing her vestibular migraines also due to the low lighting environment. So what we started to do, because you can't turn the interior light on in the car when you're driving, I told her to focus on something in the distance that would allow her to start to slow down what she was seeing. And so as the posts or the street signs would come towards us, it was going slower than what the rapid trees we were passing appeared. Mm-hmm. And so as she was able to slow down the visuals, she was able to get the vestibular system back under control, because her brain could process, this is what I'm seeing, this is the speed we're traveling, and this is normal.
This is Gina.
And this is Don.
With Focused Healthy Family. And today, this is podcast number 101. And we're getting to talk with Dr. Lori Klees, the Director of Rehabilitation Services at Lake Norman Regional Medical Center. Before we do, we pause for a moment for our sponsor. Our sponsor is Q Sciences. I've been a representative for Q Sciences for over a year. I found this company through a friend and did some research and reading about these products. And I really like what I found when I learned about them. The research and time that they've put into the quality of these products to be better absorbed into the body. Things like the vitamin D spray. Our youngest was on a capsule vitamin D, and yet vitamin D levels remained the same with follow-up checkups. And with the spray, it increased
pretty strong.
almost double.
Yeah.
And I mean, we're talking her levels were maybe 20, and I want to say they went up to 47 or something around that range. And the sleep spray is another great one. It's got melatonin, 5-HTP, and I believe another herbal supplement in there. And because it's a spray, you spray it on your tongue, it gets absorbed more quickly into your body to be more effective to help you in the moment. We're using the B12 spray. We've used the vitamin C spray. They have a Q Max product, which is a multivitamin.
And they also have the CBD, different, a variety of different.
It's full spectrum
full
hemp
spectrum, yes.
oils. They even have a THC free version. It comes in different flavors. There is a mushroom.
Oh yeah.
Armor. It's called Q Armor. It's a powder, and I get the chai flavor. Put it in my chai tea for a double chai drink.
So instead of, as they say, flushing your supplements down, well, the toilet or the drain, you want to get something like this that's fully absorbed. It's like flushing money down the toilet too, if you're not using a supplement that absorbs well and does well for your body. So that's what Q Science is really about. It's a good, well absorbed, high nutrient product.
They have multiple products. They have child specific products. They now also have some facial cream products. I've been using a night cream to minimize the effects of sunlight and stress and aging on my skin. And they have a hemp lotion. That's also a wonderful product that we've tried. So check us out, learn more. You can find the link at our website,
www.focusedhealthyfamily.com. You can also go to focusedhealthyfamily.com/Q Sciences, the letter Q and Sciences.
with an S at the end.
With the S at the end, yes.
We're back talking to Dr. Lori Klees. She is a doctorate of physical therapy, also with a bachelor's of occupational therapy. And again, like I said, the director of rehabilitation services at Lake Norman Regional Medical Center. And we're kind of focusing today on vestibular rehab and the effects it can have on people of all ages when the vestibular system is not functioning properly. So welcome. It's good to have you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, it's, and I think could we say in more common terms, it's about dizziness and vertigo and the misconceptions of those?
Yes, it's that connection that the brain is trying to process visually what we see, what we feel, and what our ears are experiencing. And so as we're doing that, that connection for some reason either slows down or isn't being made, and that confuses us to what's going on, and our body starts to create a reaction, a parasympathetic response of fight or flight, and we experience the tummy ache or the fact that we feel very anxious.
Got me thinking, our youngest used to cry the minute it got dark when we were in the car. And I'm wondering if there wasn't
Oh yeah, I didn't think about
a
that.
component to that, because she was fine as long as it was light.
Yeah, she would scream.
And it's amazing how if we can't see what's going on, we rely on all of our other senses. And when then we change that movement sensation by the fact that the car is moving, but our bodies are not, we can't figure out what is going on.
We were talking before we started about how this this moves into the senior population. Well, we're dealing with the sandwich generation, which are parents sandwiched between raising their kids and taking care of their elderly parents. And you talked a little bit about that example you gave us, a story you gave us about your daughter, and how it then turns into or relates to the senior population. So maybe you could expand back on that.
And yes, so when I was studying vestibular rehab, I was originally studying it for the purposes of the adult or the geriatric population. But when I started to see the connection it had with my daughter, I realized more of a overall picture of what is going on and how it can affect us, whether it is our children or whether it is a elderly person, our mother, our father. And so as we realize when they're getting up to go to the bathroom at night, a lot of times we're trying to keep the low light environment, especially if you do have multi-generational in the home, you're trying to get sleep. And so we keep the lights very dim. And then the older person is trying to get up to walk through this darkness. They know where they're going, but without that visual input, it starts to confuse the brain. And then you put slippers on their feet or cushiony carpeting or rugs, and it starts to confuse their sensation. And that is the only thing they're feeling is what is on the bottoms of their feet. So they'll start to reach out for the wall or for furniture and start cruising the furniture to try to safely get to the bathroom. But unfortunately, with all those changes in sensation and not recognizing where they are in the dark, then that can cause them to start to experience, I'm not sure if I'm upright or if I'm down. And then you encounter all the other variables, like medications that you're on, blood pressure, and all of that affecting how the brain is functioning. Then all of a sudden we lose our balance, and our reflexes are not as fast when we're older, and therefore we can't catch ourselves. And what's the worst place to fall but in the bathroom, where every surface is hard.
Oh my, yeah.
Yes, that's what keeps me employed.
Exactly.
So, well, I was, something comes to my mind. You've talked before about the different different colorations for the older people makes a difference, and sometimes having differences in colors can help them guide them too. Does that have that kind of idea of color separation or color differences, contrast? Does that play into this?
So, and basically, yes, that can do that, and especially depth perception. When you come to stairs, and our eyesight starts to go also as we get older, and so it's harder to tell that depth difference. So when everything is a monotone, it's very hard to distinguish where we're stepping and what we're doing, especially if we have to step down into another level to use the restrooms. Or to go back to bed, you can catch your feet. Another thing about the visual is not being able to distinguish in lighting, because that also reduces the contrast between two objects. So I often recommend to people, there nowadays you can find night lights that are the motion detecting. And so when you have a motion detecting night light, if they get up, it triggers it to come on, but it's not a bright light because it's a night light. And so they're able to just see where they need to go, get much more distinction between what a surface is and where the doorways are. But it also then it will shut back off and allow the lighting to be dark again for everybody else.
We experienced that here we just moved into a another home, and the people before us had put those on our stairway going upstairs.
Down at the foot level. So as you walk up the stairs, it lights up when it's dark.
Absolutely. I love to keep them, both for the adults and the elderly as well as for children, because, they're disoriented when they wake up at night, and they can sometimes have trouble with their vestibular system as well, being able to stay balanced when they first are disoriented. So having that ability to see where you're walking, it saves a lot of injuries.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I remember, you had come up and done that talk, and I remember you talking about there's some misconceptions around what this whole what we're talking about here, as far as is it vertigo or is it something deeper and or different than that? Can you kind of talk a little bit about that?
And a lot of times we miss what is causing our loved ones to feel the way they're feeling. And it takes kind of taking all the puzzle pieces and putting them together to create one final product. Medications are one of the very first things that can cause us to be dizzy or cause our vestibular system to be off due to the chemicals. Dehydration. A lot of times we don't get enough water, especially with the elderly population. They don't want to get up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom. So they stop drinking any fluids after 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock in the evening. And then they go until 6, 7 o'clock in the morning the next day before they get their next glass of water or liquid. And they're becoming very dehydrated, which has an effect on how our vestibular system works due to the fluids in our bodies and how they touch hair cells and create that sense of knowing where we are. So basically, people will come into the office to see me for a concern of I'm dizzy or I'm losing my balance a lot and I don't understand why. I'll see them referred from a cardiologist, from an ear, nose, and throat doctor, from their primary care. And it is a physical therapist's job to be able to distinguish, where is this problem coming from? Is it going to be an ear problem as far as crystal displacement and having what is known as BPPV, which is benign perioxysmal positional vertigo? And that is what we typically get when the crystals are displaced. But that's a very quick and easy fix. Once I'm able to identify that, I can treat that and correct the problem. But a lot of times I was finding it really wasn't truly BPPV that was causing their symptoms. So they would come in and it would be, let's start at the very beginning and talk about your overall health. And I would discover that they're not getting enough water. They're on a certain medication. And the majority of medications, if you look at the first 5 side effects, dizziness always seems to pop up in that first 5 side effects. So and then you get to talking to people. And another personal experience, as I was on a medication myself, and I had went off of it when I wanted to get pregnant and wanted to be off of all medications. And I started to feel very dizzy. And every time I turned my head or turned my eyes, I would feel dizzy. And so I went to the doctor and I asked, what's going on? And I knew I had ear problems as a child. So I first went to an ear, nose, and throat and said, what's going on? And he did a full assessment and said, it's not your ears. And I said, well, the only thing that is different is I stopped taking this medication. And at the time, the medication wasn't known to have an effect on you like that. So I got looked at like I had 2 heads. And so I moved on and continued to have the same problem, but eventually it went away. And I had my son, and then I went back on the medication. Well, 2 years later, I found out I was pregnant with my daughter. And so I went back off of the medication. And I experienced the exact same symptoms again and said, wait a minute, this has to be it. And at that point, we're looking at 2.5 years later. I went to a conference and I was speaking to some psychiatrists because it was a medication for the baby blues, basically. And I spoke to them and I said, is this medication something that would cause this? And they said, they've actually just started to find this in findings that this is a common reaction. But it took a long time before they started to put the correlation together. And I could have told them 2.5 years ago, but unfortunately. So I realized that any medication, really, if you're going to stop it, your body's anticipating getting that chemical. And if you cold turkey any type of medication, the body is going to start to react. And that's how it chooses to react, is to let you know there's something wrong.
Yeah.
Well, you deal with a lot of falls and all that.
Yeah, a lot of times people have that dizziness diagnosis and they cannot determine a cause of it. And people come, I work in acute rehab or short-term rehab, and yeah, they come in and they've often had a fall, but they don't know what's causing the dizziness.
And a lot of times, unfortunately, it is a common problem to have, and we can't always put our finger on exactly what the cause is. So when they come into physical therapy, I try to figure out what the cause is, just because that can help us prevent it from happening again. However, when I can't, it's all about adaptation, which, is an OT as well, that it's all about adapting to our environment and how we can make it work. And a lot of times people will relax about the idea of feeling dizzy because they know, okay, if this is what I have to deal with, how can I get around with it? How can it not disrupt my life? And when you give them ways to deal with it, like with my daughter, she's always going to experience that in a car ride, where she, experiences that anxiety and the displacement of where she is. And so the compensation of being able to say, hey, I'm going to look out in the distance and watch something come at me and it slows it down, then I'm teaching her how to adapt to it. And so when they come into physical therapy, one of the things we look at then is, okay, well, if you're experiencing this, what can we do to make you safer so that you're not going to fall again? Is it changing the home environment? Is it providing you with an assistive device to help you get around safely? And then we start working reflexes and balance, which is muscles. And as we get older, we can still continue to improve. And therefore, giving them exercises on balance and teaching them how to correct feeling off balance, then they can prevent a further injury.
I was just curious, this is kind of off of it, but does diet, nutrition, I mean, we've talked a little bit about water, about being dehydrated and all, but does diet play into this in any way?
So I'll put in a little disclaimer. As a therapist, I really truly can't speak on dietary needs or dietitian type topics. However, I will say that if you do have too much sugars in your diabetic, that's going to cause you to feel dizzy. If you get too much caffeine, I even know at my age and as the sandwich generation, we load up on caffeine in order to stay awake and stay aware and keep moving. But when you mess with anything that has a chemical to it, you're going to affect. So having too much coffee, which on that regard as well, caffeine is a dehydrator. And so it's going to be a diuretic and cause you to lose a lot of your fluids. So a lot of times food and, salt and all of that can have an effect on your and how your systems all work. So it is very important to make sure you're getting the proper nutrition and hydration.
Big difference. So tell us more about the specific work at the center. So like you said, people come in, get referred by a doctor when they're having dizziness, and, are there different types of visual or vestibular disturbances that you see that are treated differently?
Yes. So one of the things, as I mentioned with the BPPV, that is a quick treatment with just positioning the head in various directions to try to right the crystals. But in probably 75% of the cases, it doesn't involve the crystals at all. And so then I'm going to look at giving the proper advice, the adaptations. But then there's also exercises they can do. And I refer to it as vestibular rehabilitation training. And what it is retraining the brain. And it's pretty amazing how our bodies are able to make adjustments and meet the needs that we have. So if you have poor blood flow, we all have spider veins and different types of vessels that pop up in order to help make sure we're getting the blood flow to our hands and our feet. But the brain also works like that too. If it's sending an information from one point to another point in the brain to make something happen, and we get dizzy along that pathway, we can tell the brain, wait a minute, let's stop, let's figure out what's going on and reroute and create another neural pathway that's going to allow it to get from point A to point B without experiencing that dizziness. So we give these exercises and we teach people. Unfortunately, I have to make them feel bad to get better. Um, but as we're giving them the exercises, they start to experience the symptom and they know to stop. And as soon as they stop, they give themselves a rest and they return to it again later in the day. And they continue to do that for 5 to 7 days. The brain will retrain itself and create those new pathways. So a lot of times people get worried with way insurance companies are now and financials. They don't want to have to come to therapy, 3-4 times a week. And if I'm giving them exercises that need to be done daily, they panic and think, oh goodness, I can't afford to go every day. But the beauty of it is that these exercises are so simple and so easy to perform that all I have to do is educate, show you how the exercises are performed, and then have you go home to your safe home environment where you live the majority of your time and perform these exercises on your own. And if you're compliant with that and do that twice a day for 5 to 7 days, then I'll have them come back again, we'll recheck, and then hopefully at that point be able to advance the exercises to the next level. And therefore, I may only need to see them total of 4 times to correct something like that.
I was and as a layman on this conversation here, as far as the crystal, when you mentioned crystals, I was kind of, if you could kind of define that.
Sure. So our ears have deep down in beyond where you can look in with an otoscope and see the inside of the ear. Inside there's a saccule, which is basically a little sac that holds the crystals in our ear. And these crystals are just little tiny, almost you can't even see them visually. So really they can't do an ultrasound or a CAT scan to see if these crystals are displaced. But what happens is they live in this little sac, and for some unknown reason, sometimes there's no reason, sometimes you hit your head, and it can cause them to dislodge. And they get out into one of 3 semicircular canals that are inside the ear. And 2 of the 3 is typically where those crystals go. And probably 99% of the time they displace to those canals. The other one, the way it's shaped and positioned, it's very hard for the crystal to accidentally end up in that canal. So we now can differentiate though by how the symptoms present themselves to me when I'm testing them. I can tell whether it's in one canal or the other. And so basically all you have to do, and I say we often had back in when I was younger, a little toy that you could pick up out of a pinball machine that had a little BB in it and a little maze. And you turned that toy and you watched the BB go around the maze until it got back to where you wanted it. Well, that's basically in my head, I can visualize the direction of the canal and I turn the patient's head visually in my mind, watching that crystal move through its canal and back into where it needs to be. And initially, I'll do the maneuver maybe 1 or 2 times during the visit. Unfortunately, it does make you very symptomatic. And so I always tell the patient, we'll only do the maneuver as many times as you want to ride the roller coaster, because it does feel like you're on a roller coaster ride. But if they tolerate it, we do it a couple of times. And then I usually stop at about 3 or 4 times, because most of the time they don't need you to do more than that. And there's no sense in punishing you. And so what I'm going to see is whether or not their symptoms start to change. But I'm not going to see that right away, because the brain has learned to adapt to what it's already been experiencing for probably at least a week or 2 till they've gotten into my office. So I tell them to go home. There's no precautions, nothing that they need to restrict themselves from. I just tell them maybe don't go get on to a rocky boat or don't ride a roller coaster. But for the most part, they can go on about their business. And about another 24 to 48 hours later, I tell them, go ahead and do whatever it was that made you feel that spinning sensation that you come into my office for. And a lot of the times they don't even experience it anymore. And that spinning sensation is where the world is spinning around you. That is one of the defining factors. When a patient comes into the office, they'll tell me, I'm spinning. And I'll ask, well, which is it? Do you feel like you're spinning the inside, you're internally spinning? Or do you feel like the world is spinning around you and you visually can see the merry-go-round? If they visually see the merry-go-round, it's typically just those crystals are displaced and need to be put back. But when it's an internal spinning, it's generally due to the central nervous system. And then that becomes a much more deeper conversation.
And so when you're doing the adjustment on the head, they're actually putting the crystals back, or just
yes.
Oh, okay.
Good. So the crystals will actually float because there is fluid in that canal, and there's little hair cells. And these little hair cells stick up. And so as the crystal will float through the tube, it'll finally come to rest on one of the hair cells. And it's like a trigger. And it's a light switch. It hits it, it goes on, and it causes you to feel like the world's spinning, like there's so much motion going on. And so our eyes start to try to search the environment and see what's going on. And that's the little symptom I'm looking for, is the eyes start jumping back and forth very rapidly. And you can't control that. And so I know when it happens, it can't even be a symptom made up. It is truly happening to them. And a lot of times they can't even feel their eyeballs moving. The eyeballs just start jumping back and forth and back and forth. And then it'll stop within a minute. And if it stops within a minute, I know it's that hair cell being touched by the crystal. And then if you need to, then I'm going to move them the other way. And then I'm going to continue to pass it through until the symptoms resolve, because the crystal is back in where it's supposed to be. But it's pretty amazing to watch it happen, and it always stops within a minute. If it goes longer than a minute, then I know that it's something going on with the central nervous system and them knowing where they are in space. And that is what's causing the problem.
Fascinating.
Yeah, it sounds so simple, and yet it's often not recognized. Like you said, you have to be trained to understand, to recognize the signs and symptoms and to identify it and then to treat it.
And a lot of times, when a family member says, oh, I feel so dizzy, we brush that off. And for some reason we brush it off, just lack of time and lack of ability to understand what they're experiencing. But it is very, very concerning when you experience it, because you're not sure where to put your foot to take the next step. So then you become fearful and you start to sit more. And then the more you sit and the less stimulation you get, the more the body and the brain adapt to that and it does not like movement. And so you'll find your loved one starts to sit more, and then a plethora of other problems start to happen, and they get weakness and they get more balance problems, and their reflexes even slow more. So the worst thing they can do is sit still. But if you ever, got onto a merry-go-round and you feel like, okay, I want to get off, but it's still moving, not to get off, because it's not going to go well for you. And that's what our loved ones are experiencing when they say, I feel dizzy or the room is spinning. It's a very fearful experience.
So is it something that if you should really have checked out, no matter what level you feel it's at?
I always recommend it if they're experiencing that, and it's more than just, a one-off that they have it happen and then it goes a while, because, every now and then we might eat something that makes us not feel well, or we get the flu, and it's a very short-lived problem. But if it's something that's been happening and you're noticing that they're maybe not even telling you about it because they don't want you to get concerned, but they're sitting more, it's worth just checking in. And, you can go to whichever doctor you feel might be the problem. And eventually they're going to refer to physical therapy. And that is where we really can delve into what's the problem. There are a few good ENTs that will prescribe testing, VNG testing. And that type of testing can determine for sure whether or not it's coming from the ear system and how that communicates with the brain. But if you happen to go see your cardiologist and just want to mention it to the cardiologist, they can then make sure it's not something due to blood flow. Or if you're primary care, if they have time, they can look into it. If they don't, they refer out to physical therapy and we can take a look and identify.
Do you have any other questions?
Well, I just thinking about, the aging population and just all the different factors involved in falling. There can be so many other contributing factors, and this is one that's often just underdiagnosed, not paid attention to, just like you said, people just accept.
We're getting old.
Getting old, yeah. So I'm a little dizzy, but
and we know it happened from, the young age when we just learn how to walk all the way up until we stop walking.
Yeah. Well, it's been a fantastic, I love the information. It really, it's something I had never thought about. Well, when I saw you do the talk, I was like, well, this is really interesting, and it really fits for what the kind of population we're talking about. And so I'm really glad that we were able to get you to come on, because I think this can help a lot of people.
Yeah, and like you said,
I was just going to say, it's definitely a topic that I could talk about it at several different sessions and still have new information to give somebody. And it really does just take delving into it and picking out the pieces. And to me, it's like playing with a puzzle every day. I get to put the pieces of the puzzle together to find out what that final picture is going to look like.
And it's good to know for parents of young kids that, if your child's complaining about these different things, that it needs to be looked into as well.
I wish we would have known some years ago, but yeah. Just real quickly, if you want to, I'll have it up on the description and all. But tell them how is it best for them to find out more about this for you
and about you and
the hospital and all what you do.
So basically, you can speak with as I mentioned, your specialist, your primary care, and they know to forward you to my office with a referral. If you come to Lake Norman Regional Medical Center, unfortunately, we do require a referral. So it will have to come from a physician. However, as long as if you're maybe don't live close to the hospital or it's trouble for you to get over to where we're located, as long as you find somebody who has a vestibular rehabilitation training, specifically a certification. I have a certification at a basic level as well as an advanced level, took multiple classes. And I really do believe it takes somebody who's certified to be able to pick out all these little pieces and put them together. And at Lake Norman Regional Medical Center, I am the one who is certified. But I am working with a lady, I should say, that I'm training to take over into my spot because I'm also the director. So I have limited time. So she is getting all her certification courses and working on that. So you can go to a general physical therapist, but your best bet is to find somebody who is certified in the topic.
Yeah. And our audience stretches beyond the greater Charlotte area. So yeah, making sure your doctor refers you to, like you said, a physical therapist that specializes.
Well, and do you, just out of curiosity, do you work with people through the Zoom, to this new internet way of doing healthcare?
We have debated trying to do that, but it is one of those things where it's just much better to be able to see the person in person and be able to be there. A lot of the testing that is involved is very physical. I have to position them, like I said, if it is for the ear, as well as if I'm trying to assess their balance and the relation to their balance. I wouldn't want them to stand up and try to do any of the maneuvers without, having somebody there to help them and keep them from falling.
Right.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Sometimes things need to be more hands-on and can't quite do it virtually, but I know there are other centers and places across the country, and finding the physical therapist who specializes, like you said, has a certification in vestibular rehab makes a big difference.
Well, Dr. Klees, thank you so much for being part of this. We really appreciate it. And like I said, it's a topic that I think fits very well with the kind of audience that we're dealing with, and it's going to help a lot of people, I think.
Very good. And I enjoy trying to get the information out there and let people know that life is something precious and we should enjoy every moment we have.
We appreciate you so much being here and sharing everything today. To our audience, if you like what you've heard, please share this with other people that you know. Connect with us on Facebook, on our website at focusedhealthyfamily.com. See all the other things we have going on. Tune in each Thursday to our podcast, either on YouTube or anywhere you listen to podcasts. And check out our Tuesday tips that we air each Tuesday.
And remember, how you speak to your children today shapes their future and yours.